Magic, and the way it interacts with the world at large, is the lifeblood of the Final Fantasy series. While the role of magic differs between games, by 1997, magic in Final Fantasy had become synonymous with goodness and the natural world, thanks to its portrayal in Final Fantasy VI and VII, the two most popular releases in the franchise at the time. Magic was seen to be on the side of the hero, in contrast to technology or science, which were often used by the game's villains to carry out their evil deeds, or to signal that they were an unnatural and unwelcome presence in the world. But in 1999, Final Fantasy VIII was released, and with it came an unusual subversion of this trope, as pointed out by writer Melindy Hetfield in 2019. Magic in this game is no longer a life force but a poison, causing amnesia and feeding corrupt sorceresses hell-bent on disrupting peace. The fantasy elements weren't removed, but gained an unusual negative connotation. In this video, we're going to look at the role of magic in Final Fantasy VIII, and see if we can discover what it is about the magic in this game that makes it so different. The first thing to note about magic in Final Fantasy VIII is that, unlike previous titles, magic in this world is considered a chaotic and destructive force that interrupts natural life. Over 100 years before the events of the game, the Lunar Cry caused an avalanche of monsters with magical powers to descend from the moon, which destroyed the entire Centra continent and wiped Centra cities from existence. It also warped the planet's native plants and animals, turning them into the magic-wielding monster enemies that we meet throughout the overworld. Magic and humanity are seen as opposing sides. Magic destroys human life, and humans who wield magic naturally are viewed as having less humanity. In the latter half of the game, we're introduced to the legend of VIII, which serves as an origin story explaining how sorceresses came to exist. It literally only occurred to me recording this that it's probably pronounced Hein. So, sorry again. In the story, VIII is a trickster god and the creator of mankind. He wakes from a long sleep to find that the humans he created have multiplied in number. To cull the population, VIII murders the small humans, aka children, and then escapes the angry mob by shedding his skin and hiding himself in the bodies of women and children. This, according to the legend, is how the power of the sorceresses came to be. Both the history and the storytelling in this world give us the impression that magic is something inherently evil. It is something that must be fought against and overcome, not embraced. Magic is not on the side of the protagonist, but something the protagonist must conquer and control in order to save the day. We can see the idea of magic being a corrupting force when we look closer at the story of the sorceresses. In the two examples that we're given in-game, becoming a sorceress is depicted as a deeply unpleasant experience. Both Rinoa and Edea become sorceresses against their will at a young age, and both express the fear that their newfound magic will in some way corrupt them, causing them to lose control of their own bodies. This isn't an unfounded fear either, because the game tells us that unless a sorceress has a male guardian to remind them of their humanity, their immense magical power will cause them to go insane, eventually leading them down the path of evil like Adele and Ultimecia. In fact, rather unusually, artificial magic is depicted rather positively in the game. The junction machine, created by Dr. Odin, allows non-magical humans to harness the supernatural power of the Guardian forces by merging together with them, mimicking Sorceress Adele's ability to do the same. Unlike Final Fantasy VI's Gestalian Empire and Final Fantasy VII's Shinra Corps, Final Fantasy VIII portrays the attempt to use science to recreate the supernatural for a military faction as a great accomplishment and a much-needed tool in the fight against evil. When reassembled for human use, junctioning no longer becomes a threat, but a way for the protagonist to level the playing field with the antagonists, whose primary weapon is, you guessed it, magic. Which brings up an interesting point about the role of science and technology in Final Fantasy VIII. Science and technology are often shown to be in conflict with magic, used as a foil to our heroes to show the lengths that mankind will go to for greed, and the horror that ensues when humanity tries to play God against the natural world. But in Final Fantasy VIII, science is on the side of humanity, helping them to fight off what they see as an invading force. Science gives humanity a leg up in the unequal fight against the sorceresses. And unlike scientists in previous games, Dr. Odin, while slightly creepy and self-centered, is portrayed as quite harmless in comparison, and even works on our behalf near the end of the game. Technology also gets a PR rebrand in this game. The 3 garden schools were originally high-tech shelters created by the ancient Centrants. Technicians in Fisherman's Horizon rebuilt the structures into schools, so futuristic technology is a large part of everyday life in both Balam and Galbadia Garden. And major towns like Esthar and Fisherman's Horizon use technology to develop and expand. So Final Fantasy VIII flips the roles of magic and science. The question is, why? Well, there's technically 2 answers to that. According to the Ultimania, the lunar cry is part of a long-running cycle that reoccurs naturally every 1,000 years or so, when the surface of the moon becomes oversaturated with monsters. As we've already discussed, the impacts of the lunar cry are often devastating. The last time it occurred in living memory, it wiped out a 4,000-year-old city. It's fair to suggest then that the people of this world could have built up a fear of or distrust of magic over many centuries, considering that the lunar cry was one of their only interactions with real magic. Final Fantasy VIII gives us just enough information about magic and those who wield it to make us question whether the things we're told about the world we live in are inherent facts or the biased opinions of others. Are these legends truthful historical accounts, or myths that helped an earlier people explain something they couldn't yet understand? Is magic actually an evil force in this world, or do its people simply believe it is? Is magic a destroyer of humanity? Or did people see how the native wildlife was changed by the lunar monsters and come to that conclusion themselves? Are witches doomed to be consumed by their power? Or have the shadows of Adele's reign and the Sorceress' War made the recovering population deeply suspicious of anyone who shares a similar magical power? By making Rinoa a sorceress, I think Final Fantasy VIII is asking us to consider whether witches are actually inherently evil, or whether other people perceive them that way, and therefore that perception impacts the way that they behave. There's also, of course, the more practical answer. Final Fantasy VIII needed to be different to Final Fantasy VII, and changing established ideas like the brightness of the overworld, the party type, and even, potentially, the fantasy tropes surrounding magic were an effective way to bring something new to the game while keeping it just familiar enough for loyal fans of its predecessors. In the end, the game seems to present us with the idea that while magic is this game's tool of evil, it may not actually be evil in and of itself. In a similar vein, science and technology, while a tool of good in this game, may not inherently be a positive thing. After all, advanced technology is a trademark of the Galbadian dictatorship and one of the first enemy bosses that we fight in the game. It's a piece of Galbadian technology that blows up Trabia Garden. And the junction machines? Well, we're shown firsthand the type of side effects that can occur when you play around with artificial magic. If magic is neither good nor evil, it means that it is individuals who shape the way magic is viewed by the way that they choose to wield it. That's part of the reason that I think, despite everything, the end of the game strikes a hopeful tone. There's a new generation in town that is no longer afraid of magic. With that in mind, it's no wonder that we see our 2 main characters sail off into a bright new sky in the final scene. It looks like there might be a better, more magical future on the horizon.